Hey, welcome back to class. I want to bring a couple of quick tips that will help you to overcome some of the common challenges and areas for growth, particularly in survey and detailed observation when you're still in the process of getting comfortable with inductive Bible study method. Again, these things are completely normal and expected, but I just want to point out a few things that allow you to strengthen your work for the long haul. Again, all of these assume that you're not just in this class to get through the class. If you are, you're free to ignore all these things. But if you want to actually learn inductive Bible study and have a great tool for the rest of your life, you want to think long game as you're learning these things. First thing, and this is the one comment around survey. When you're doing a survey, the idea is to get a big picture, and the idea is also to create a map that you can come back to in the future. I can walk over to my closet. I have a box, and I did all of my inductive Bible study work by hand because I took this class back in the 90s, pre-computer, and it wasn't easy just to use a typewriter to type these things out. So I literally I can go back and find my work from 91, 92, 93, 94, and ever since then, I have it all saved. I can pull them out, and I've been able to use them in my ministry of preaching and teaching ever since I did them the first time, and they always give me kind of a fresh starting point. But the key then is you want to be intentional. So first of all, in your surveys, make sure that when you're asking questions as well as identifying the strategic passages, those all link back to the structures that you identify. So if you have identified, say, contrast, your questions aren't just going to be anything that you find interesting in the passage, but instead you're going to ask a set of questions about how you see the contrast functioning in the passage. So obviously, when you describe contrast, you're going to be talking about what is being contrasted, and then you're going to ask things like a definitional question. What is the precise and specific meaning of the two elements that are being contrasted? So like in Matthew's gospel, we were going back and noticing that there was a contrast between Herod and then Joseph and then the wise men. We would list those things out. Why is this contrast here? Why are Joseph and the wise men being contrasted with Herod? And then what are the full implications? Also, strategic area. Again, these aren't passages that you just think are important. For each structure that you identify, you want to think what smaller part of the text best exemplifies the structure. So if I looked at this little small passage, I'd be well on my way to understanding more of the passage. So you want to link those to structure. And again, they can overlap. So the same strategic area can be linked to more than one structure, but you want to make sure that every structure is linked to a strategic area. Okay, second, this is an easy one. When you get into detailed observation, and this can be in the detailed observation step or once we begin actually doing some interpretive work when we're making observations and inferences, regardless, make sure you describe the text and not just quote the text. Quoting is super low level, and the temptation is like if you quote it, then you ask a bunch of questions. That's not observation and questions, right? A better thing is to say something about the text. Now, if you're in my inductive Bible study classes, you have access to a worksheet that's called Suggestions for Improving Observation and Inferences. If you just stumbled across this video and like the worksheet, reach out to me. My contact information is pretty clear. But describe, don't just quote. The third thing is, in these early stages, the temptation is to assume the text is saying something to me or to us in the 21st century. So we use I and we language. Well, guess what? As soon as you've done that, you've already, number one, assumed you know what the text means, and also you assume that the text says something to you. Before you apply the text, you have to describe it, and you want to kind of look at it. We're trying to look at it as much as we can objectively. Again, if you've had hermeneutics classes, interpretation is always subjective at some level because it involves us, but we have to try to hear the text in its original context for its original audience before we explore how that text interacts with us in the modern world. So don't apply before you've done interpretation. So avoid I, we language. If this is your first semester IBS class, you don't need to use I or we language for any assignment because we're not doing evaluation application this semester. That's a skill that we work on in the second IBS class at the 600 level. I'll model some application, but I'm not asking you to do that. So get in the habit of describing the text really in a third person voice. That's the safest way to do that. Then the fourth thing that can improve your work instantly, and this will help you in the long haul, is cite the verses. Like when you make an observation or you're describing a structure, make sure that you actually list the verses where you see the structure functioning. You may know intuitively right now or from your memory what you're talking about, but guess what? You come back and pick your work up a year from now or maybe even 10 years from now when you decide to proclaim or do a lesson, you're not going to know what you're talking about. And also, for that matter, when I'm grading your paper, it's not always obvious what you're talking about. So even if you're just interested in a grade, cite your verses. But you want to be as specific as you can so that your work endures. And again, I'm going to tell you, I literally had I took 5 IBS classes when I was at Asbury. And I have a stack. I almost used a ream of paper in those 5 classes. And that 500 pages of inductive work that I did, that's helped me as a pastor. It helped me when I came back to Asbury and started teaching because I had a good foundation to build out additional things. And that's what's fun about studying Scripture. You can go even deeper. Again, I'm Brian Russell. It's an absolute privilege to serve you this semester. If you have any questions, you can reach out directly to me, or you can just put a question in the forums. Glad you're in here, and I look forward to receiving some outstanding work as we move towards the end of the semester.